Good evening, everyone. We are about to begin our class number 12 of Advanced Course in Drones for Development. Today, as a guest speaker, I have my friend all the way from Dominican Republic, Orlando Perez, who had recently launched their cargo drone project in their country with the help of Caerobotics and many other partners. We will be hearing from him about the experiences that they have had, the learnings that they had, the difficulties that they faced, and how did they overcome them. And this would be the last in the series of cargo drone projects. Tomorrow we'll be talking about public health emergency. And from the next week onwards, we'll be picking up a new theme altogether. So today is the day when we learn all about the cargo drones. And please feel free to ask as many questions as you want to Orlando at the end of the presentation. And I'll be around to facilitate the question and answer session as well. So over to you, Orlando. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Great. Thank you so very much for this opportunity in participating in this course. I've been double checking the past presentations for the last couple of days, and it's actually really interesting, and it's very happy to find and see and listen to colleagues that has been doing fabulous stuff all around the world. So this is definitely a great opportunity for me to present this project that we initiated back in 2016. My name is Orlando Perez. I am in charge of the coordination of the DR Lab initiative in the Dominican Republic that runs under the Centro de Innovación de Drones, or the Drone Innovation Center, which is, I would say, like our mothership that has all of the entities that gather the drone initiatives in the Dominican Republic. And we're going to be looking at this project that was funded by the Inter-American Development Bank, where we basically addressed the need to look at alternatives of transporting medical deliveries in the Dominican Republic. So let's just go ahead to the next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of context of where we are. We are in the Caribbean. Basically, we are a small country, I would say, in the Caribbean basin that has a population of no more than 10 million and plus individuals. Okay, so population of a little bit more than 10 million inhabitants in the Dominican Republic. We are in the middle of the Caribbean. We are neighboring with the Republic of Haiti. Just to give you a little bit of context of where we are. And in the map, there is a province that's called San Juan. It's the biggest province of the country, and that is where we actually set out to do our trials. So let's go to the next slide. So basically, what we encountered back in 2016 when we initiated the project was basically looking at this premise that there are definitely health supplies that save lives that are not reaching rural population. And this is something that I've seen in other presentations, and in fact, some that were actually presented within this course, that of course, rural communities do have that situation in which, although they do have a health system that is there for their inhabitants, they just do not get proper health care. And this is something that happens all around the world. It could be because basically the distances between these rural communities and major cities is a challenge. We other have to deal with Mother Nature that many times puts us in a real difficult spot when we have mudslides and hurricanes and so on. So that's something that from day one, when we initiated the project, we were anticipating that we would be presenting a solution for this specific problem. So go to the next slide, please. So there you go. Local communities in remote mountains of the Dominican Republic do not have regular access to healthcare services. On a note here, these rural communities do have clinics. They do have small clinics with nurses and interns and doctors, but they just do not have proper coverage. Most of these clinics come the end of the month, as far as inventory, run out of essential medicines. So if you're sick, if you need a specific medicine for whatever concern you or your family member may have, you may most likely walk in and not find those medications in stock. Another big problem that we did not anticipate is that basically you cannot have tests being done in these locations. And that's a problem. Of course, we cannot assume that every single rural clinic would have capacity of running tests. That's a problem all around the world. The problem here is that if you have an infection, if you're sick, if you need diagnostics, you would have to go to the major hospital that is far away from that community. And that's where the problem starts. Why? Because the cost of transportation from these rural clinics to the major cities is very high. Okay, so that is basically the biggest problem that we are encountering here in the Dominican Republic. And then, of course, port infrastructure. A lot of roads that definitely are not suitable for this transportation. So let's see the next slide, please. So the solution that we proposed back, 3 years ago was basically create a network of drones that would connect, in this case, 3 hospitals, these hospitals that have the capacity of running specific lab tests, with no less than 6 rural clinics. That was the first initial layout that we had put in place. Next slide, please. Just to give you an example of what we eventually planned, in the red circles are the 3 regional hospitals, and the yellow circles and the routes would be the anticipated rural clinics that we would connect with these drones. So we set up these, we would say 3 sub-networks ranging anything from 8 kilometers, 8.5 kilometers, up to 20 kilometers in distance. Some of them not only being distance in terms of the kilometers, but also climbing a lot, meaning that we would have to go to higher elevations. So it was a bigger challenge there as well. So that's the basic layout that we had in terms of the network of drones that we placed for these trials. Next slide, please. So it's basically it. This is basically the platform that we had. We have rural clinics that would have drones either taking off from the rooftops of the rural clinics, and they would fly one way over to the major hospital to do diagnostics. That's the basic layout. Next slide, please. And the system is quite simple. Doctor would, or the nurse or the health worker would take blood samples, take it up to the rooftop of the hospital or of the clinic, load it onto the drone, use an app or a tablet, take off the drone, and send it over to the designated location. That's the basic premise of what we did. Next slide, please. So, as far as starting, we had one first call. Let's test drones. Why? Because we really had no idea on what drones we were going to be using. So the first take was say, okay, let's see what's out there in the market. Let's actually see what others are doing. And let's find 1, 2, maybe 3 solutions that we could actually test, pilot, and see what would be the outcome of these tests. So we started testing drones. Next slide, please. So initially in 2016, we started with Matternet. For those that are a bit acquainted with the drone delivery cargo and the history around this, Matternet is, I would say, one of the top three companies that has been doing medical samples deliveries, cargo delivery with drones for some time. They are a very mature company. They have a very sophisticated platform. And they were the company that initially partnered with us to do these trials. So back in 2016, we had that great opportunity. They came to the Dominican Republic with their equipment and they ran a week of tests. But the issue here was that although we did have a very successful set of flights, we basically were not able to manipulate the technology, to pilot the drones. Their business model up to date is still very much in which they operate their own drones. We were just basically on the sideline as participants, but basically just seeing what was being done. It was good to get stakeholders encouraged in these trials, but at the end of the day, it served no purpose for us because we were not able to scale up. So we said, you know what? Thank you for these first trials. Again, they were very successful, but we were just as participants, just looking at the trials of their technology working. That's when we partnered with We Robotics in 2017, in which, of course, had a very, very different approach. They just basically said, you know what? Let's test other platforms. Let's manipulate a bit the technology and let's see what other responses we can have in terms of using different types of vehicles. So they presented two basic models. One was the Delta Quad from Vertical Technologies, a Swiss company that had a hybrid unit. That's the one that's in the middle. And we needed that hybrid because we needed to have vertical takeoff from the locations that we were flying from. And the second model or unit that they presented was the DJI M600, which turned out to be, at the end, the most robust system. So these were the three systems that we eventually tested throughout the whole project. Next slide, please. So in terms of sharing experiences, we found, I would say, 6 major challenges once we identified and narrowed down the use of a specific type of drone. The first challenge was flying beyond the visual line of sight. We had to, first of all, get the authorization and the buy-in from local aviation authorities, because as you may all know, flying beyond visual line of sight is quite tricky. I mean, for drone operators and drone pilots, having the drone in sight is very assuring. Once you do not see the drone flying behind a mountain, it's in nowhere's land. So it was very demanding, very stressful to actually set up missions in which we have 10, 12, 15 kilometers of distance with beyond visual line of sight. Fortunately, we were able to overcome this fear, and we did not have major incidences regarding flying beyond visual line of sight. So we were able to pass that challenge quite easily. Next slide, please. Our second challenge, once we had identified the drones that we were going to be using, and then knowing that they were capable of doing these missions beyond visual line of sight, was having a system that had to be autonomous. From day one, we were always anticipating creating a system, and that's where We Robotics pitched in which we would have drone operators initially, but we were creating something that had to be handed over to health workers. So it had to be something that was simple, click on a button, and to be autonomous. there are a lot of challenges in having autonomous flights as well, because most of these drones that you buy off the shelf, they would have systems where you could actually plan missions. They would fly as much as you program them to, but they will return to the point of liftoff. So we needed to have a system that would be able to take off in location A and then land autonomously in position B. And that we were able to also have done with the support of robotics so that we could actually surpass. Next slide, please. Our third biggest challenge was to make sure that once we had the system running, we had drones flying from point A to point B, we had a system that was autonomous. We needed to make sure that whatever we were transporting was actually being delivered and transported without having the samples that were transported compromised. So what we did was basically run a whole bunch of flights in which on one side we had the health workers transport the samples. We were taking actually 2 samples from each patient. One that was transported in a pickup truck and as they do on a normal basis, and one that was transported on the drone. And what we did was basically compare the results to make sure that there was no compromise of the results of the lab tests. So fortunately, at least for the types of samples that we were taking, which were basically normal blood samples, these lab tests were not compromised. So the results from both tests were actually accurate, knowing that then we can use drones to actually transport blood samples. So that was also a great hurdle to pass as well. Next slide, please. So then it was time to actually say, okay, now let's have lab technicians, local doctors, local health workers to run this by themselves. So yes, we had drone operators and pilots on each end, but the idea was to make sure that they were able to operate with a click of the button, the whole system. And we Robotics was able to provide us with a system that was very much touch and go. So they would take the blood samples, walk up to rooftops, put the blood samples in the cargo box, touch on a button, and the drone would actually do the whole mission autonomously. So yes, it was quite easy to operate for them. We had no pushback from them. Next slide, please. So then, of course, we had the company of Robotics with us from day one, but then came the date that they were actually saying, you know what, we need to transfer this knowledge to you and we need to get back home. And we need to make sure that there is local capacity that is able to troubleshoot any situation that can occur with this network of drones and make sure that you guys could actually run and operate that by themselves. And that we did very successfully. They stayed with us for a couple of weeks. They came back for a second visit in the beginning of 2018, but then local operators were able to basically run the operations by themselves. So you can just pass the next 2 slides, please. So they were just transferring all the local capacity to us. And then our final challenge was the precision landing. Because again, we did find and we narrowed down the use of one specific model, which was the DJI M600. We did have an autonomous system. We were flying beyond visual line of sight. It was easy to operate. But then came the time in which, how can we have these drones actually have a precise landing spot on the rooftop? This is quite difficult. I've had a lot of people tell me No, it's quite simple because all you have to do is do a mission plan and you put the GPS coordinates, and then the drone will fly from point A to point B, and that's it. It turns out that's not the reality. The reality is that once it gets to the second location where it's supposed to land, in many occasions we had alternate, or I would say faulty landing positions. So it could be either 2 or 3 meters to the left, 2 or 3 meters to the right. But when you have a drone that is needed to land on a precise spot on a rooftop, you cannot have that level of error of 2 or 3 meters to right or to left. You need to make sure that it landed in a precise position, and that's where then with the support of the engineers with robotics, we were able to have these tags on the rooftops, and it was superb. It was definitely the best and cheapest solution out there. So we were able to have precision landing. Next slide, please. So at the end, after 2 years, we were able to have 157 successful flights. I would just highlight that between August 2017 and December 2017, we had those initial flights. But then in July 2019, we actually did 101 flights in a single month. And all of these flights were done locally by drone pilots that were in the Dominican Republic, that were already trained under the DR Flying Labs scheme. And we were able to troubleshoot and get the road ongoing. So it was very satisfying to have a system that actually worked and that were operated completely by local drone operators and so on. So we were able to actually achieve that with great fashion. Next slide, please. So then, to end this presentation, with the support of our partners, another partners in the project, which was Village Reach, which I see that you had a presentation a couple of days back, we did have some expected benefits, and we actually achieved most of them. So yes, we were able to reduce time in transport between distances of rural clinics and hospitals. The patients were actually able to save money because they did not have to pay for the local transportation from their own pocket. Governments, anticipated saving money because it was actually anticipated that if we would restock with the use of drones, it could actually be a bit more cost efficient. And the products were, safely transported. Either it was blood samples or essential medicines. All of the items that we transported did not have any type of alteration. And then, of course, it opened up the opportunity for many other potential use cases once we had the local capacity in the Dominican Republic. Next slide, please. So that's it. That was our basic experience that we've had for the last couple of years. Again, I apologize for the initial setbacks on this presentation, and I'm open to any questions or conversations or suggestions that you may have in terms of looking at the second stage of these type of projects. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Orlando, for an amazing presentation. I'm extremely appreciative of everybody who patiently held on to our glitches, and thank you for being with us. Sorry for the goof-ups. Orlando, before we begin the questions, I have a question for you. I was looking at the map that you showed where DR lies, Dominican Republic lies. So what is it that was different with Dominican Republic, which was not there with other countries of Central America or the Bahamas?
Well, I mean, we are seeing every once in a while other initiatives that try to emerge in these countries. I think local leadership was actually very much interested into looking into this, because at the end of the day, it comes down to individuals. Unfortunately or fortunately, we would need government backup, and fortunately, we were able to actually get this in order to do these trials and get into these clinics. And so the Dominican Republic just served as a great location to actually test this, because we had all of the players that needed to be in place to actually do this. But then again, we have been hearing from other neighboring islands that are very, very eager to jump into these trials as well. So hopefully we're going to be seeing more use cases that most likely are going to be done in this atmosphere as well.
Thanks, Orlando. So there are questions about the costs. So is there any estimate of savings for patients and government? Like, do you have a number in mind, or you have calculated something?
Well, listen, that is a. I'm sorry, give me a second. That is a quite a complex situation there, because when we started 3.5 years back, the cost surrounding drone technology, the use of sophisticated softwares, the use or the unexistence of UTMs in progress, it was really an issue, because at the end of the day, the numbers were not adding there. What we have been seeing for the last 2 or 3 years is that the cost related to drone operations and logistics has dropped significantly. Why? Because basically we are having on one side the regulators, the entities that should be providing permits to do tests like this, they're easing down on it. So every time you see another country that is willing to open up their airspace to do these trials, the next day you find 1, 2, 3 companies that say, I have a solution. So my basic reading around this is that I feel that there are solutions out there. There is technology that is going to be more accessible as fast as we are able to open up the airspace for more trials. So again, 3.5 years back, this was something that was out of the box. It was very complex. Nowadays, you're finding every single day another company that's saying, you know what? Let's go ahead and try this. Not only for medical supplies, last mile delivery is a big hurdle in terms of logistics. So now you're seeing cargo companies, parcel companies, ports, you name it. There's a lot of interest into finding solutions that we could transport small or medium-sized cargo. So every day we would find a more suitable and less expensive solution in the near future.
Thanks, Orlando. So there are similar questions around the cost of per sample delivery averaged over a month. And the second is about the daily rate of drone pilots and about maintaining a team, the cost of maintaining a team.
Yes. Well, this was our reading around this. And fortunately, we had the participation of Village Reach to do some cost estimates, and not only do the cost estimation, but also analyze and do some surveying on local capacity to actually scale this up. And to summarize a bit what their findings were, initially, the cost of cargo deliveries with drones definitely is a bit more expensive than the traditional cargo, systems that are out there. So if you have a moped, a small motorcycle, or a pickup truck, you will still find some, I would say, more cost efficient scenario around there. But then again, this technology is dropping. I think the issue around this is in terms of the operation. If we are anticipating that we need to have highly trained drone pilots in the system in point A, in point B, then we're going to have a situation there, because then we have to have a highly qualified individual to operate these drones. If that is not the scenario, if the scenario is that we're going to be able to have autonomous drones that are safe, that are reliable, that can do the missions without having to have a certified and well furnished drone pilot, then it all changes. What we found with Village Reach, and one of the big questions were, okay, if you are in a if you are in a rural community, are you going to be able to find tech savvy individuals that can at least operate this? And it turns out that there are hundreds of young and not young individuals that are very smart, that are very tech savvy, that do not have any problems into troubleshooting and operating basic drones operations. I'm not sure that this is a global thing, because again, they did their research in local communities in the Dominican Republic, but it turns out that at least in this hemisphere, these youngsters that have been living in these rural communities forever are very tech savvy. They, with very few instructions, they were able to take over basic drone delivery operations from one day to another. So it seems like this is something that is this new generation of tech savvy individuals in these rural communities could actually be part of the solution.
Okay, thanks, Orlando. And there is a question about, do you provide inventory management for the health centers? And what would be the storage time till the blood samples get compromised?
Well, we would still need to really deeper into that. We were able to, as it was a pilot, project, we were able to transport a significant amount of basic blood samples, basic tests that are done in a normal fashion. But if this system were to be actually put in place, then there are some complexities that need to be addressed, because you have cold chain, for instance, to consider, because there are a huge variety of tests that need to have cold chain put into place. So in our case, our longest flight duration was maybe 14 minutes. 14 minutes is not too bad, but when we started discussing this with lab technicians, they would say, listen, anything after 10 minutes that is in the tropical sun, that has humidity, that has some level of vibration with a drone, you're going to have some difficulties. So then, of course, if this would be a system that is going to be put into place, we must definitely look into other considerations, specifically for cold chain. There are some solutions for refrigerated drone boxes. There are some types of boxes that can be also actually furnished to, maintain some level of humidity and temperature. But to be honest, we did not get way too deep into this, because we were basically a bit more busy just seeing if this thing was working. But for the initial trials and the tests that we transported, we had no problem. It was a no-brainer.
Thanks. And talking about M600, how did it behave in the terrain, in the difficult terrains that you were? Was it good?
Well, the M600 is a unique and superb vehicle. It's strong, it's sturdy. We were flying in high altitudes to be a Caribbean country, which had a lot of issues with wind, sudden wind. And this vehicle per se, the M600, I mean, it did the task superbly. There was no issue whatsoever. In fact, as looking forward, we were actually looking into maybe downsizing the size of the unit because it was actually too big. So you have more batteries and you have a bulkier equipment. So there are other solutions under the DJI family, other vehicles as well. Of course, there are other drones. There are other companies. It doesn't have to be DJI. It just turns out that we would prefer to use a more sophisticated, well-proven vehicle instead of testing other solutions. But there are others under the DJI family that can do, at least for these flights and for the cargo, the payload, which was not more than 4 pounds, that can be used. The M200, the M300 can be used as well.
And did you have any challenge with maintenance of the batteries and the drone itself?
Well, no. Battery wise, we had no situations. Basically, because our routes were not too long. So when we would set out a mission, we would maybe consume no less than 60% of the battery. So when it got to the rooftop, we had enough space, to use the battery a little bit more than 60% of capacity. So battery wise, that there was no specific problems at all. And with the vehicle per se, we did encounter some mishaps in terms of sudden rain that would eventually get on the drone. And as you know, these drones are not equipped to be under rain. But even though a couple of drops got on them, some wind, and it was no problem at all. We had no situation.
All right. And talking about batteries again, did you have to swap the batteries at a particular location and then send it back? Did you have something like that, or it was just at one place where it was maintained?
Well, yeah, we we always swap batteries. I mean, we were tempted many times to say, hey, listen, we got 60% left, 50%, let's send it back, you know? But then again, it was just a safety factor. You know, we did not want to push the limit on having a drone hovering on top of a rooftop with 10% of capacity. Because the situation was that in almost, I would say, more than half of our 150 flights, the drone would land with over 50% of capacity. The other 50%, unfortunately, we would have the drone being hovering on top of the clinic, sometimes for 45 seconds, maybe a minute and a half, basically because it was trying to find the tag to do the precision landing. So then, you know, what if you have that situation in which the drone is just there trying to land for an extra 2 minutes? It's going to consume 10, 15%. So we actually did it maybe once or twice without swapping the batteries. But then again, we didn't want to be too cocky, too hot dog. We'd rather just say, let's play it safe. But then again, we are having every single day more sophisticated and robust batteries being presented. So hopefully we're going to have a system in which we're going to be able to not have that battery swapping, at least from in the landing location. That's coming soon.
And people are curious about your landing pads as well. What technology goes into it? Any software, apps, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was presented in this forum back. What these guys from robotics came out is the use of what is called Aruku, which is a pattern, an image that is allocated in the computer that's on the onboard computer of the drone. And then it's basically you have a tag on the rooftop. And once it finds that pattern, it just starts to descend ever so slowly. We did have a couple of situations in which the tropical sun was so bright that it would reflect sometimes on that tag, and then it would have a little bit of trouble trying to recognize the pattern. But then again, that is very easily solved if you have a more sophisticated camera on board. So, we were troubleshooting using local technology, cheap technology, to be quite honest, and it worked perfectly. Maybe 2 or 3 times that, it had some problems recognizing the tag, but then we found out it was because of the sun. Okay.
And Orlando, how much time or it would take, or what was the speed that you were maintaining to cover a distance of, let's say, 10 kilometers?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
The speed and the time taken for the drone to cover, let's say, a distance of 10 kilometers, how much would that be?
Well, the flight routes were done in 10 minutes. I mean, 10, 11 minutes was, and we did not push the drone, meaning that it was going fast, but it was not going too fast. So if our purpose was to downsize the time length of the duration of the mission, we could have done it a little bit faster. We just did not want to push the drone too much. So we kept it at a, normal velocity. But definitely when you compare it to the traditional ways of getting to places in the Dominican Republic, it's 45 minutes versus 10, or 35 minutes versus 10. So in terms of time, definitely there is no discussion. Drones are faster, a lot faster.
Okay, and you did not, think about like 45 minutes is doable, so why have a drone for 10 minutes?
Yeah. We were tempted to do a little bit faster than that, but we're just trying to play it safe a bit. We had a lot of eyes on top of us. There was a lot of anticipation around this, and for those that are drone enthusiasts out there, we've heard the stories of feeling a little bit too comfortable, pushing the envelope a little bit more, and that's when you get into trouble. We did encounter a couple of situations initially. So we learned from our mistakes, and we says, no, safety first. We have to go through the guidelines. There are specific protocols. I don't care how many times you have to repeat the same operation over and over and over. This is serious. You have to understand that you are using technology, hovering over people, and safety has to be first. So you just can't rely on technology to back you up.
And are you planning to kind of scale up your distances? For example, today you're doing about 10 kilometers and 12 kilometers, and maximum I think you showed was 20 kilometers. So are you trying to do longer flights, like 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, something like that?
Okay, I'm going to share my impression around that.
Okay.
To be very honest, come July of last year, my impression, this is my personal impression, was that as far as testing and deployments in the Dominican Republic was going to end, we were going to wrap it up, learn from that experience, and move on to other stuff. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I actually sat down with my wife and says, no more trips to the rural community. We're going to stay in the major cities. This is done. It turns out that globally, this thing is having momentum. All around the world, there is a bigger, more profound and robust interest into logistics and drone deliveries. So it turns out that, yes, we are definitely looking into two different things. Not only taking it to longer distances, I think we still need to step back a little bit and make sure that whatever we already have in place, which is really nice, it's still not perfect. We must understand that the approach that we've had with DR Flying Labs and with the support of Robotics is basically saying, listen, let's take existing technology, let's hack it, let's manipulate it, and let's get things done. It's the only way to learn and to advance in this. And we still have some issues there. We're having issues with telemetry, meaning that unfortunately, once these drones get into the air, you tend to lose them in the mission. So whoever is flying missions and has had that cold sensation in your belly when you do not see your drone on that tablet, it could be anywhere, you know? But then again, it's only for those individuals that have lost a drone or lost it for 2 or 3 minutes. It is heartbreaking. But then again, now with 4G and 5G being more robust all around the world, we're having better telemetry. So we're having better access and communication and permanent communication with the drone while it's doing these flights. And then again, we're having more companies providing more solutions. So definitely my impressions of last year of closing this chapter and moving on, no, definitely there is more drone cargo to be put into place, not only for medical supplies and blood samples, but also for other commercial applications.
True. And how's the community supportive about the whole thing? Are they excited about it?
Well, Dominicans get into anything. I mean, they are game. We are, I think it's the Caribbean blood that just makes us jump into anything. We are not afraid. And we're very fortunate. And we've been very fortunate once again to have leadership also back us up. Because again, everything we've been doing is with compliance with all local regulators. So it would just take the negative approach on any authority to shut down any project. Fortunately, and this is something that is quite rare, globally and locally, we have had support from everybody. And that has, given us that chance to actually take it to a next level, and then to a next level. I hope we keep on having that type of support.
And also, Orlando, I've been a little curious about this. We keep having enough flying labs that we don't want to use drones as an excuse to not do the development work. So, for example, if the roads are bad, if the bridges are broken, I mean, we're not using drones to find an excuse of not doing that basic work. What do you feel about that? What do you see the drones doing, that kind of filling the blanks?
When we started back in 2015, and we embraced in this project that, of course, we went out to the villages. We saw the impact that it would have in rural communities. We saw the very, very bad infrastructure that was in place. My impression and from our team was that, wow, this is something that totally makes sense, that definitely is something that is going to be very well perceived and supported due to the situation. But it turns out that 2 or 3 years later, the infrastructure is not that bad. We're having a lot better roads, more accessible. So the issue was that, okay, do the drones actually make sense now that there is better infrastructure? And it turns out that it's not only for these type of scenarios. Even if we have good infrastructure, it turns out that every time we find more solutions, every time we find more technology that is accessible for individuals to overrun a whole range of tasks, then it's not only for the medical/health scenario. It's actually for businesses that are saying, you know what? What if I use a drone for this and this or that? So we're having that on a daily basis. I mean, just recently, I visited the biggest port of the Dominican Republic that has, I don't know how many big ships coming in for cargo. It turns out that we were sitting down looking for use cases for the port. And I never knew that there are specific ships that need to get into the port just because they have to hand in specific paperwork in order to go to the next island. And they were saying, oh my God, if we could only leave that ship in the outer sea, send the paperwork with the drone and take it back, the amount of money that they were saving, that they would save just because the ship did not have to come in, stay overnight, and then leave the next day without taking any cargo. And we were like, let's look into this. Again, there are so many applications out there that ever so slowly are being identified and that companies are actually backing up as final solutions for their services.
So talking about a utopian world when we have perfect roads and perfect roadway delivery system and the medicines are all stocked up and everything is all perfect, still the drones will make a difference in the lives of people, right?
Yeah, yes, it would. But hold on. Even if we have all that infrastructure, take under consideration that last mile delivery is the biggest hurdle of any country, even if you have drones or not drones. I mean, it's a simple example. I tell people you order an iPhone on Amazon and it's cheaper and easier to get it from wherever it's being produced, Malaysia, China, up to the Dominican Republic. It's easier to get it all the way from there to the Dominican Republic than that it would take to get it into my hand, maybe 2 or 3 kilometers away. Last mile delivery is the biggest problem that all of these companies have. So drones would provide a solution for that, specifically because, I mean, most of the cargo is under 5 pounds. So drones could definitely step in and do those, I would say, shorter sized packages, deliveries in any location.
Yeah, that's a good thought. So thank you, Orlando, for answering most of our questions. If anybody still has an unanswered question or a query or a concern that you would like to speak about, you can just unmute yourself and talk about it. Somebody's curious about if there are crashes or fails, how does the community react to it?
Okay, we have a pact here. We decided not to talk about that ever, but
This is a
we
classic.
laugh about. Oh my God! Yeah, I know. We laugh about it now, but I do recall our first crash, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was something that just tore us all apart. And then we found out that hey, it's a normal process. I mean, fortunately, we had very few dilemmas in terms of equipment, either being lost or crashed. Okay, we were. I don't know how to say this. We were quite fortunate because this project per se, we had everybody involved. This project, and this is something that I would definitely suggest to anybody that's going to get their hands into this. You have to have on your side presently every single stakeholder. I don't care if it's government, if it's security, if it's students, if it's community leaders. Everybody must be present. And I know there is I've been in projects before in which some of the project leaders would say, you know what, I'd rather do this covert. Let's not have people nosing and looking what we're doing. No, we have to come in as humble as possible, knowing that we are here to learn and mistakes are going to occur. And from failure, you're going to have a bigger reward. But you must have everybody participating from day one. And so when we had our, I would say, one or two mishaps, it was not foreseen as a failure. It was just something that everybody just got together and says, okay, let's double check what happened. Let's see what has to be done so it doesn't happen in a second occasion. But then there has to be a very formidable and robust participation of every single stakeholder within the project.
Yeah, as they say, you cannot cross an ocean fearing a storm. Storms will happen, right? Failures will happen.
Storms, yes, storms will happen. We have stories, but we could have a separate session on that.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Orlando. I think we will end the class tonight. I once again thank Orlando on behalf of the whole class, and I thank all the class to be so patient. We have really crossed our time limits today, but thank you so much. We had an amazing session, Orlando. Thank you so much for supporting the learning of this entire class here. And we will meet you guys tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Good night, Orlando. Have a good day to you, Orlando.
Thank you all, and good night to all. Thank you so very much.
Bye.